Hello, everybody, and welcome to Practical Inclusion. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I live, work, and play on, which is the Wadawurrung people. And I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and a big call out to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today live or on the replay, and also for any First Nations people across the globe, but also specifically in the US, where my guest heralds from today. Really, thank you so much, Wendy, for coming on and having a chat with me today. I know it's nighttime your end or afternoon your end, and it's early morning here in Australia, but it's such a honour to have you come on and talk about aging today, and with particular reference to the workplace. I'm not going to talk on too much more. I'm going to hand straight over to you. Usually in these LinkedIn Lives, I don't introduce people. I get them to introduce themselves through story. And so I'd love you to tell us a little bit about your story and how it's created a connection with the topic that we're talking about today.
I'd love to. Thank you very much, Bree. And hello to everyone who's listening. I found my way into the aging world when I was a very young worker in the Hollywood studio system. I was working for a television studio where most of the people there were well over 50, and there were mostly the worker bees that were between 18 and 28. I noticed that a lot of people were there one day and gone the next. There was a lot of turnover because a certain job would never age. You would never be older than 30 in a certain job. So I started getting close to 30 and I knew it was time to look for a new job before they told me. And I was very lucky that I found a wonderful boss who was very encouraging and got me to think about age neutrality, because she herself was much older, but she had faced discrimination and she knew what it felt like. So she brought me sort of into a mentorship role with others who followed me. And I learned mentorship. I learned from the expert, and then I passed it along to a younger generation. And from then on, I always looked for jobs that had multiple generations working together in teams so that there were not any us and thems. We weren't separated by age, by race, or gender. I worked in mixed teams. I worked in all kinds of environments, whether it was in a warehouse or a front office, corporate office, executive office. And they rotated people so that we would be familiar with the entire company. That's a kind of training that is a thing of the past. I don't think it exists anymore. So anyway, it led me into working with the rights of employees and how many times we don't have the voice or the knowledge in how to speak up. I might have been aged out at 30. Other people aged out at 40. The tech people were aging out at 40. And that started sinking lower and lower to 35. So if people are always shifting out and rotating through their jobs, they don't get pension benefits. They don't get a community of coworkers and closer knit teams. So there's a lot of repercussions to not having the security and the intergenerational mentorships. So now I look for those things when I'm asked to give my opinion about age bias. If I walk into a company and the only people there are working in cubicles and they all seem to be between this and that, maybe they're older and maybe they're underpaid, or maybe they weren't given a chance for promotion. They've been at this same job for their whole career. So you just start questioning, why are some people promoted up? Some people get great reviews, but they're not given raises. They're given maybe a gift card, but that's hardly enough to satisfy most of our rent and obligations. That's a long way of entering the aging world, but once I got into it, that was my niche.
Yeah, right. And so what types of work are you doing currently in this space?
I assist HR directors, human resources directors, as well as employment labor attorneys who are looking for evidence about age bias in a particular company. There might have been a case filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which will have to approve a case before it's heard in a court. Those attorneys who hire me want me to look through files as well as observe a workplace to see if there's evidence based on my experience and what I'm looking for. I'm looking for demographics. I'm looking for accessibility, physical accessibility, accommodations made for disabled people, easy access doors. How much security do they have? How much training in security are they offering older adults? Excuse me. Quick moment.
Yeah, of course.
It's very, very dry here.
We've had rain for many, many days, so the opposite.
What I would give to see a cloud or two. So anyway, I've been working with attorneys part of the time and with employment human resources directors to help maybe understand the ways that age bias can rear its ugly head in the workplace. But a lot of industries have different age barriers, which surprises me. But even in the hospitality industry, which is the biggest thing in Los Angeles, besides the entertainment business, hospitality runs our economy. So when the hotels don't have accessibility factor, they don't have an easy access door or a room that has a walk-in shower or the proper lighting, and maybe special meals for people who have different dietary needs, kosher, eating disorders. There's all kinds of things that you have to be sensitive to in hospitality. And I'm hyper aware of these things because my world really overlaps the world of accessibility and disability and ableism. That drives a lot of my work now. The older I get and the more my friends and relatives suffer from their own medical issues, it sensitizes me in a different way. Is the company they work for making their lives better and making it easier for them to come to work? Or are they giving them remote options or maybe even equipment that works? I've faced my own equipment barriers.
It's such a big topic, isn't it, for organizations to really consider the impacts of age on its workforce, but also the impacts of age on recruitment and retention and promotion. I'm interested, just recently I was looking through, I was analyzing some data for a particular organization, and it became clear that there was a very stark difference between women and men who had been at the organization over a long period of time. So for those who had tenure that was greater than 10 years, women were more likely to still be at the lower paid positions, whereas men whose tenure was over 10 years were much more likely to have progressed up the leadership chain, so to speak. Is this something that you see commonly, that gender impact?
I'm going to give it a name on top of it. Older women's issues, because aging is an older woman's mainly issue, both personally and professionally. One other experience I had, my awareness about the ageism that existed in benefits and exactly what you're talking about, was when I worked for a television writers union. And there were many, many men coming in to talk about their benefits, but very few women. And the only women were either the first wives or maybe the last wife. But some, people are married multiple times. They have multiple families. And when there's a benefit to be paid, they have their hands out. They want to share in the benefits. So all of that is a very legal issue. But like I said, there were very few women who were beneficiaries or writers at that time. And it's a bit better now in the US and internationally. I don't want to name names, but just from Netflix and the other streaming services, we've seen a lot more opportunity in the DEI, the African American writers and other people of color and indigenous writers who are now being heard and seen by the public. But yeah, the lack of benefits and the way that women ask for money on the way into a job and after they get there, asking for what they deserve, that in itself has not become the norm at this time. Although I'm constantly reading other women writers, Brene Brown, Kathleen Reardon, who lives in Ireland now, who wrote a most wonderful Harvard Business Review, the letter that every woman should keep in her desk. And if you have not seen this, look at my LinkedIn. I reposted her announcement. She was chosen for this Harvard Business Review chapter that she wrote several years back. And it's just caught fire lately again for I don't know how many times, but it's the kind of things that you wish you had said that you didn't really have the words for, perhaps because you never knew a woman who was open to feeling equity with her male peers. But some of this is so new. And then, I'm sorry to bring it up, but the last 2 years have not been good for women in the workplace, and especially for older women, 40 plus in the workplace. So whereas all of us have equally suffered from communication issues and trying to find our healing and ways to grieve what's happening around us, we're not finished with it yet. And that in itself, that issue keeps me in check when I start thinking, well, why aren't people acting normal? It's because we're still really caught up in the flow of disease and fear and caution. And the economy is not where it should be. So I don't want to get too political or too economic oriented. We're, talking about ageism and age bias, but it is tied in, and it is a corporate issue.
Absolutely. And I don't know what the current practice is in the US, but there's certainly a lot of, we're experiencing another wave of the pandemic here in a time where organizations had started to request their staff go back into the workplace. And I know that's had unequal impacts on people based on a range of different factors, and certainly gender and age is one of those, for sure. Elizabeth, thanks for watching this morning, and you're 100% correct. Women are the fastest growing cohort in homelessness, and particularly older women in our country, and it's a real concern going forward in terms of superannuation. I know the system's slightly different here than it is in the US, but there is certainly a real issue for older women, and I think that's going to really come to play when we look at these type of statistics, that the salaries that they're earning at the end of their careers are not in any way going to make up the gap that they have in retirement savings. Wendy, I'd love to kind of just unpick that a little bit more. What are the types of, you've described some of the areas in which there are barriers for people, particularly older adults in the workplace. What are some specific things that you think organizations should be doing to create more inclusion for older adults in their workplaces?
If it's a larger company with 100 plus employees, it's just a simple matter of reviewing their data, their employee data on a regular basis, not once a year, not never. But in fact, to look at their hiring practices and then to look at their onboarding practices. Are they offering the kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion training that is based on something 5 years ago? Or is it something that has built upon the last few years and included the issues that are much more extravagant now, especially the LGBT movement and the disabled rights movement? Because talk about being loud. These these groups around me, of which I have affiliated myself out of interest, not really professional interest, but personal interest, they have found their voices. And watch out, because I met a gentleman who was part of a group called Respectability, that is for disabled rights. And he was wheelchair bound for life. He had been, born with some kind of a disability. And he was a Harvard Business School graduate and an attorney on top of it. So he was one of the executives from Respectability. And when you meet someone who maybe has less than you in mobility, but they have immense understanding of the world around them, and their way of navigating it has shifted. I guess the pivot word keeps coming up, that you have to be able to pivot and take on a new attribute and learn a new skill and find a new talent that you didn't know you had. And the people who inspire me the most are working with much less in resources than I ever had, but they are accomplishing so much more. So I just think we can all try as hard as we can. That's as hard as you can try. If it doesn't get you where you want to go, associate yourself with people who have the strength and the courage and the wisdom, and keep learning, because learning is lifelong. It doesn't end after school. I really don't mean to sound preachy, but I feel it.
Absolutely. And commonly I have, when I have aging discussions with workplaces or clients, they kind of allude to the fact that perhaps the older generations aren't as au fait with technical innovations. And I don't find that to be the case at all. As you say, learning is lifelong. Have you experienced that kind of stereotype or bias around the technical knowledge that is assumed that people of older generations will have?
Well, the funny thing is, I've recently talked to some younger people, at least younger than me, in their 30s, who are struggling learning programs for work. And the corporate world is constantly adopting new technology and trying to get their systems aligned with the latest and greatest. But that doesn't mean that if you're working remotely, it doesn't mean you can learn it overnight and be up to speed in your work the next day. So there is a real gap there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that it's one of those stereotypes and biases that comes into play. So I'm interested, you mentioned the LGBTI community, and there is I'm coming live again later this afternoon. For those who are watching, I've managed to get James Lollicato, who's the CEO of the Pride Cup organisation, to come on and talk about an issue that's kind of flared in Australia, unfortunately, over the last week or so, about a rugby team that put a rainbow on their jersey, and a number of their players have boycotted the game that they will be playing in the jersey. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. It's much more complex than it sounds. But I'm certainly interested in your thoughts around the intersection of being LGBTIQA plus and being an older member of the workplace as well.
Well, given that many LGBTQI, and I'm just going to abbreviate shorter instead of adding the IA plus, because we do have enormous amounts of questioning and asexual and inquisitive individuals, and I respect them a great deal. But right now, the first generation of openly gay political elected officials are now reaching their elder years. And many of them have been HIV positive most of their lives, their whole adult lives. So we have, much more treatment now than we had 30 years ago. And many of these, individuals have, very low viral loads, I believe is how you say it. And they're very much active in the community and politically and professionally. But that is new. And because there's relatively few business owners and high net worth executives the David Geffens, I'm thinking Lily Tomlin and some of the, better known out people who are successful in their careers. But you don't really hear a lot about the middle income or the people who are really struggling, especially after the last 2 years. So I feel I am not in touch with several organizations that I refer to who help people from the community, from the gay community, to find resources, healthcare, and job support. So whereas we do have this immense hospitality industry here, we also have a lot of career professionals who are grant funded to help specifically that group. And so I'm doing a lot of referrals for individuals now. And I do a lot of pro bono work, which maybe it is why I sound like I have a hand in many different pots, because I'm a little bit of a Jewish mother on top of being sort of a mother hen to some younger people who really don't have family. They were asked, they were booted out by their families when they were younger, and they have alienated, the people who they cared about, or the people who cared about them alienated them, and they seek their family by choice. So that's been the biggest part of my life for the last 20 or 30 years, is having a group around who are my family by choice too.
And that's an entry. When we exchanged via email, I really, related to the way you wrote that, that there is, that for many people, it is about family of choice and how you connect, how you choose people. And that's certainly very common of the LGBTIQA plus community by necessity. But also it can be a beautiful thing. I love what you've mentioned there, because I think it's really important for us. And again, in research that I've been doing with clients, it's become very clear that LGBTIQA plus people in the 40 plus generations feel less connected to a lot of the inclusion work that's being done around LGBTIQA plus people, because it quite often is framed in a way that it's for the younger people, and there's always this common trope that the younger generation have got it all. They're all about gender diversity and sexual diversity, but the reality is we're all still here too, and beyond. And it's not that there were less LGBTIQA plus people in those generations, it's just they were less likely to be out.
We didn't have the words before, and we didn't have the voice.
Yeah.
In my hometown, and I'm from Norfolk, Virginia. And when I was growing up, there was only one out gay person that was even known of, as far as I knew. And he was extremely out. He was very very flamboyant, lots of makeup and jewelry. And he was hugely successful. So he could do anything he wanted. And he didn't care what anybody thought. So the more he behaved like he didn't care, the more people were finding fault and being critical. And I think that's why I didn't want to live there, that I had to find a place where people could be their best selves. And I never hesitate when I meet someone who is sort of questioning, well, are you or are you not? Are you gay? Are you straight? Are you this? Are you that? And I really don't like labels, but I always talk about where I live and what I associate with, and that it's okay, that I can be an ally and I don't have to be exactly like you, but I can understand you, as you were giving homage to the Native Indians from your area. And even here, very close to where I live, are definitely the same type of historic sacred ground. So how quickly they forget what they want to forget. And then the little nugget that stays with them about the rights and obligations that we have to the tribes who lived here before us. And we took over. So let's try to make that right. Did you hear about the family in Manhattan Beach which is close to Los Angeles, where an African-American family had their land stolen in about the year 1900. And the land was taken over by the government to make a park, basically. And then recently, through the political process, one of our female elected officials in Sacramento found a way to find the property rights and give it back to the family, the Black family that owned it in 1900. So it's a win for, the giving back what we should have given back to people who lost their rights through no fault of their own. If you're born Black, or you're born with one arm, or you're born LGBTQIA, then that's the best you can do. And I often think, hey, Wendy, look in the mirror. You're white, you're Jewish, you got an education, you have options, you have choices, where a lot of people don't have that. They may look in the mirror and say, no one's going to be able to open that door for me. So I try to keep flexibility in mind. And when I look at demographics of a company, especially, I am like an eagle for this. I will look for where's the red line that shows what kind of people we're talking with, the kind of hiring people, the kind of people who make those decisions. Is there diversity there, or is it just talk?
Yeah, great point to end on. I think I've loved this conversation and having this chat with you. We've tackled a range of different issues in this session, so I'm really grateful that you gave us the time to come and share your wisdom and your knowledge with us, and your personal lived experience as well. And it's just amazing the types of things that you're doing to create more inclusive spaces for people of all different demographics. So thank you very much, Wendy. And thank you, everybody, for listening in today. I feel like I haven't had a lot of lives, and now I'm having 2 in one day, so I'm overwhelming you, but you can watch them at any time. So if you are watching this on the replay, feel free to put some comments, questions, and Wendy and I can jump on there and engage in further conversation with you on any of the topics that we've discussed today. If you are around at 2 p.m. today, Australian time, Australian Eastern Standard Time, you can come back on and jump on and listen to me talk about, or myself and James talk about LGBTI inclusion in sport. So thank you, Wendy, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye, Bree.